Welcome to In All Honesty, the podcast where we get real about life and all the problems that come with it. I'm Michelle Elman, and I'm that friend who we all know is a little bit too honest. You might not come to me when you get back together with your ex, but I'll be there for you when it all goes tits up. Welcome back to In All Honesty, and today's co-host is Alice Living, who I have a lot of respect for. Why I wanted to get you on the podcast is because when you were doing your book tour for Give Me Strength last year, I was so in awe and had so much respect for you because someone publicly saying, like, I got it wrong and I'm doing it differently now is so brave. And yeah, so I wanted her on the podcast, but also you are a person who's come from diet culture, talking about more positive, intuitive relationship with exercise. And I know it's a number of things that people ask me about and also how to overcome it and where to begin. So can you give everyone a bit of a background of your journey around exercise? You're obviously an incredible PT as well. So you've got that unique position of the personal and the professional.
Firstly, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate your kind words. Because it was a bit of a rough ride and a tough book tour, but I really appreciate.
Did it feel really vulnerable at the time?
I think, yeah, and I think that, like, on reflection, I don't think I'd quite prepared myself for what it would take to kind of have this big because the reality was that you asked me before we started. You were like, "Were you ever fully cancelled?" And the answer was kind of no. But there was definitely a shift where I said, I can't do this anymore. Like I don't feel comfortable in what I'm sharing. And I knew that I was leading a very disordered life. Like I think anyone that's had disordered eating or eating disorders, you sort of know deep down that what you're doing isn't normal and isn't healthy. And I definitely had that recognition.
So for context, you started as Clean Eating
Yes,
Alice.
sorry, shall I go back? Because I feel bad that we've just jumped in. I trained as a dancer, so I went to theatre school, had the dream of being on the West End stage, was absolutely adamant.
Give you disordered eating.
Yeah, that was going to be my path. And also when I think about the context of why I ended up where I did, I grew up in a dance studio. I stood in front of mirrors for the entirety of my life, looking in the mirror in a leotard, being compared to other girls being preferred or being told that their bodies were like the perfect body. I remember being told, like, really young, I'm saying like maybe like 8 or 9, that I just didn't have the right body to be a ballerina, and that was my ultimate dream.
You know, what's amazing was I stopped ballet at 10 years old because they said I was too fat.
Like the dance industry has so much to answer for. But imagine saying that to a kid. Like, how can you do that?
Like, it's because I couldn't suck my stomach in, and the teacher told my mum she doesn't suck her stomach in, and if she can't, then she's not in the class anymore.
It's so interesting. Funnily enough, I came across a video on TikTok that explained this kind of morphing in dance to the very thin, long, lean physique ideal. And actually, that was never the case early on in ballet. Like, you used to have a lot more dancers who were slightly more curvy and sort of had boobs and all sorts. And then a specific choreographer came in who loved this lean physique, and it kind of took over. And so then you have the impact of that on people like yourself and me, who were growing up just wanting to love ballet and enjoy dancing, and we're told, oh, actually, no, you don't fit the part, you're not the right shape. Yeah. And I remember that so vividly, and I just remember really feeling so uncomfortable in my body from that young age. So again, context is crucial. When we talk about diet culture, there's a whole host of things that add to why I ended up in the way that I did and doing the things that I did. But going back to my point, I trained as a dancer, went to theatre school. While I was there, I became very conscious of the fact that I wasn't the strongest dancer and I wasn't going to be the number one in my year. But I received some negative feedback about my first year assessments, and I was like, right, I'm just going to be really strong. I'm going to go to the gym and get really strong. And there was born Clean Eating Alice, where I thought what I was doing, given that in my first year of uni, I ate pizzas and Dominoes and ice cream every day, I suddenly was eating like a chicken breast and some broccoli. And in my head, it was the healthiest thing I could do. Like, I did not have a concept at the start of it being as sort of detrimental to my health as it was.
But it was also the epitome of health at the time. Like,
of course,
we are the same age. I remember that being like, if I saw someone eating like that, I'd be like, God, you're so disciplined. Yeah. How do you do it? Please tell me your ways.
I know, even like the hashtags, like I'd put like no days off, cheat meal, you know, all of these awful things. But I do think that we exist, like none of us make decisions based solely off our like individual experiences. We're all having these collective experiences which contribute towards why we make the decisions that we do and fall into the behaviors that we do. And I just think I got really swept up in that. And a lot of those behaviors, and again, I have to have compassion for myself in this sense that they were so normalized at the time.
And when you started posting on social media, did it just take off instantly?
No, not instantly. I was kind of just like using it as a bit of a food diary, really, just posting my meal. I mean, honestly, you have to scroll back on my page. I think, I don't know, some of them are still there, that like the blandness of the meals that I was making, like who knows?
I would never even scroll down on my own page.
The lack of virality was clear. But then I connected with a few people online. Joe Wick shouted me out at one point. That got me a few followers. And then I think I had like a Daily Mail article that was written about my page. This was when I probably had like 10 to 20,000 followers. And from there, it was like over, I think I got over 100,000 followers overnight. Like literally, I remember it just being like, like, you know, like people following me. So from there, that's when it really started to grow.
But I think what people don't understand, and I think I understand it a lot better because I went viral overnight. And for mine, it was a complete opposite. It was a bikini photo with my surgery scars on show. But you've suddenly got this platform to upkeep with, where sometimes you don't feel like posting, you don't feel like what you're putting out online. And even though I was in the body positivity space, I have the very real experience of going on body positivity photo shoots where I was actually genuinely saying what I felt. But people were just as insecure on those photo shoots as normal photo shoots. And then they were going online being like, I just had the best day at the photo shoot. And I was like, oh, actually, this isn't helpful, because I'm hearing you say on the photo shoot, like, no, I don't want photos of my arms. I don't want photos in certain angles. And then you're going online and saying, like, it was a perfect day and that you didn't have to diet before. And I was like, is this not two parts of the same coin, where it's still putting out something that's not authentic?
Well, that's my biggest issue with social media now, is that the smoke and mirrors is extreme. And I find my biggest issue with wellness culture, actually, and the kind of industry that I still, to a certain extent, exist in, is I know for a fact that there are so many people that tell their audience one thing and do another. And that very much frustrates me. And that will be something that to this day I will adamantly never do, is that the life that I live and how I now practice with exercise, with my diet, I will always be 100% honest. And I will always make sure that, because that's what bothers me the most, is that because I've been in that place where I did that. In the book, I wrote about it, eating a salad for dinner, but taking a picture of a burger and posting that instead and being like, having a burger, but I wasn't. And that bothers me now, because I know, because I've been in that place of, you know, dishonesty and lying to my followers. And it's just, it doesn't serve anyone. So I do get really frustrated with that. And I completely agree with you. The other thing I was going to say, though, is you asked about kind of the age at which it hit and that like overnight kind of virality. The thing that I also now really think about is just how much pressure. Like, I was 22 when I signed my first book deal. My only qualification was that I just qualified as a personal trainer. Like, I was just starting to take on clients. It's not that, like, there is absolutely a conversation to be had where it should have been me saying, I don't think I'm up to this. Like, I don't think I'm ready. Yeah. I need more experience. I don't know enough to write this book. But at the same time, there was this whole machine around me that was like, more. Yeah. Like, you know, there was so much.
It's like a moving train and you can't get off.
Yeah.
And also, there is a responsibility in the system that's in place of like, have you checked someone's qualifications? Have you actually run this book through a nutritionist, a doctor, all of these things? But also, even on my side, like from a psychology perspective, I think most people don't know that, like, when a journalist prints an article, for example, when someone prints a book, there aren't usually checks and balances in place around that. There is a lawyer that will check legally if it's okay, but in terms of accuracy...
But that's because the publisher doesn't want to be sued.
Yeah.
It's not for you.
But that's the funny thing. Accuracy-wise, it doesn't matter as long as the book sells. Yeah. It doesn't matter as long as it's money. The only reason the lawyer's involved is because of the money. And so I think that's where, like, when a journalist declares wellness trends, for example, for the year, it's a really overtired journalist who has to pump out 20 articles that day. They're jumping on the 2025 thing. It doesn't mean that that wellness thing is actually something new, different, or like we have it with foods now, like kale's the food or quinoa's the food or whatever. Like, nothing's actually changing around the fact that there's some really tired person behind a keyboard who actually has to fulfill their quota that day. But that person doesn't necessarily have nutritional qualifications, has any personal training qualifications behind them. Their qualification is being a journalist, the fact that they can write. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a funny world. And I just think that at the time I was on very little money in a UK tour of a musical that was my first job out of college, living in people's spare rooms. Like this offer came to me. I'm suddenly like, obviously I'm going to take it. And definitely there's a conversation to be had, like I said, about, should I have done that? Was I ready? But at the time as well, I think, the Dunning-Kruger effect is strong. When you first start out, you think you know a lot and you're like, yeah, I can do this. I know everything. I think I'm good. And then the more you learn, the more you realize you know nothing.
Yeah.
And actually there's so much to learn and you're never going to stop learning. And, now if you were to say to me, would I have published that book? Obviously I'd say no, but it is what it is, and that was the journey that I went on.
Because I believe books are time capsules, and in the same way that if I went back to my first book, I would probably change a few things, and there are a few things that have been spotlighted to me that I didn't have enough awareness around, which I could have phrased differently. But I actually think it's the only knowledge you had at the time.
Yeah, do you know what? I agree with you that before we started this podcast, we were talking about cancel culture, and I said, what would it have served for me to have just disappeared off the face of the earth, or anyone who's been cancelled? Like, surely the learning is to be done in the reparations, in the kind of learning from your mistakes.
But also out loud and in public, which is what you've done.
Exactly. And I think that what does it serve anyone to just write someone off and them to never, there are people who should be cancelled, by the way. Like, there are certain situations in where I do think it's appropriate, but the majority of time, the majority of in the world that we exist in, people pile on someone, and not that this happened to me, by the way, but people do pile on someone, and then where's the learning? Where's the growth? Where's the compassion? And
prevents the learning, I find, most of the time. But when you started changing your content, was it the change in content alongside the personal journey, or had the personal journey actually happened a while before?
I think the personal journey had started a while before. I think there are a few things that I really remember being catalyst moments for that change. I think the first thing was being in a relationship and being genuinely happy for once. I'd had really horrific relationships growing up, had a really horrific relationship with myself as a result of that for a long time. And then finally being in a relationship where I genuinely felt loved. I think that was a really big thing for me.
I also think living with someone, you see how other people eat.
Big time. And also the other thing that Paddy does for me is Paddy has the most amazing group of friends, and people that don't even have, lots of them don't even have social media. And I remember spending time with them, and it would always be me that was leaving early. It would always be me who'd be like, I've got to be at the gym tomorrow, or not drinking, not eating this, not wanting to go to this. And I realized that my life was so small and had become so small. And I just remember this feeling of I want what they have. I desperately want this fun, full life. And in the place that I am now, I can't have that because I can't eat certain foods. And
I think
whatever.
That's two things. One, you're not nutritionally having enough energy to do those things, but also it's putting a priority. And actually, it's one of the ways I teach people to get out of diet mentality of your life, how you feel is more important than what you look like. So that you leaving a party early to go to the gym, yes, there are times in your life where you'll want to do that. But if that is the choice every time, then you have to actually start looking at is this benefiting me?
And also to this point, and I think again with this conversation, one of the things that I'd also ask myself is, what's driving that motivation? Because there are times when sometimes I do want to leave things early and I do actually want to get up in the morning and exercise. But what's driving that? Is it guilt?
Yeah.
Or is it genuine, I want to feel good, I want to feel at my best? There's, and if I wake up in the morning and I'm
I
really
just want an excuse to leave people.
Yeah,
right
sometimes.
Now. I want to be alone.
God, yeah. We've all been there. But I think
introvert in me.
I think digging into the motivation behind these decisions is really important. So my previous motivations to exercise would all be rooted in calorie burning, guilt, and just generally feeling as though I was a better person if I exercised better, kind of the halo effect of exercise. Now, my decision to exercise is very much rooted in how it makes me feel, what I enjoy, and also recognizing that there are times when I do push myself harder, but there are times when I really pull back on my exercise, and I have a much more undulating relationship with exercise, which is, varies depending on my cycle, on how busy I am, on other things. And I have this conversation with my clients a lot that I always get them to kind of draw up a pyramid and put exercise on it. And in that pyramid are going to be lots of different things like social life, work, kids, relationships, whatever it might be. Things that are important to you. and having this conversation about exercise not always being able to be number one.
Yeah.
In most of our lives, exercise cannot be at the top of that pyramid.
But
it can
same
probably
with
be
your
around the middle.
partner, or same with work. It's never going to be concretely your, in life coaching you call it values, where I'm like, your relationship's not always be your number one, but also work's not always going to be your number one. There are changing phases in life, and actually like health and fitness is one of the values where like it will rise in your priorities if you have ill health. But likewise, if like you've always had good health your whole life, I'm not surprised if it's lower on your list, because it's just something you've probably not thought about.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like you're allowed to change and flow, but that requires quite an intuitive relationship with exercise. How do you start? Because that's kind of the main question that everyone's like, how? Like practically.
The thing that I would always say is, when I talk about exercise, I think the first thing that people go is, like, how much, what, when, like, you know,
They want a rule
they
book.
they want a rule book, and they want the best for this, and the, you know, what should I be doing for that? The first thing that I would say, and the biggest rule that I live by, is something is always going to be better than nothing when it comes to exercise. So kind of rip up what you think you should be doing.
I just recorded an episode, literally the episode
say
before.
that?
I said the thing with diet culture is like it trains you that you need to do a full hour.
Yeah.
You need to do 3 times a week,
Oh,
otherwise
God.
it doesn't count. And it was flipping it and saying something is better than nothing, because I did 25 minutes yesterday rather than a full hour. Like,
But literally yesterday, I was sat making some notes. I was listening to a podcast with like a leading exercise researcher who's from the US. And he used that quote, and he was like, look, when it comes to strength training, for example, like, yeah, sure, there are certain parameters that I'd love someone to adhere to, and I'd love someone to work with in terms of pushing their bodies, lifting slightly heavier weights at some point when they feel confident enough to. That would be great. But ultimately, if someone is going to stick to going to the gym and lifting 3 kg dumbbells because that's what they feel comfortable with and that's what they're going to do, who am I to judge? Like, that's something, and it's better than nothing. And we know that always that's the rule with exercise, that if we can just do a bit, and I think that helps us to get rid of this mindset of, you know, one of the things that I think really affects people with exercise is that they set the bar here, and if they don't meet it, they sometimes feel, I haven't been very motivated. I'm late. All these internal conversations. I'm lazy. I'm not good enough. I'm this. I'm that. You know, if you set the bar here and you say just for weeks 1 to 6 of your like relationship with exercise, that you're just going to do 1 session a week, set the bar really low and meet it every week, and make that session something that you genuinely enjoy. You know, go into it feeling as though this is my one exercise session and I'm going to smash it. And when you get into a habit of being able to do that 1 session, then we can start to talk about layering in 2 and layering in maybe a 3rd and looking at what you're doing in your sessions. But the first thing is just getting yourself there. Just start in by setting the bar low and being able to just move. One of the things that really bothers me in the exercise community is that there are so many judgmental voices about the most basic things, like, oh, it's not enough, or it's walking isn't exercise, or, you know, they're not lifting heavy enough. And it really bothers me, because I think we've existed in an environment in the exercise community where we have ignored and actually shamed a lot of people that would really benefit from being in our community. Ultimately, in my eyes, every single person in the world belongs in the exercise community. Like, it is for everyone, and everyone should be doing it. But what has happened is there's been like elitism, this kind of, you know, if you're hitting these certain things, then you're fit, and if you're not, then you're, you know.
So what I get
doing.
is, so I've worked out quite consistently since I was 19 years old, and I get, well, if you're working out for that long and you don't have the aesthetic results on your body, why do you bother?
Ugh.
Which is such a backwards mentality. And it's so funny what you were saying about like that 1 session a week is enough, because after my breakup, I found it really hard to exercise. And I actually haven't spoken about this yet, and I'm not sure I'm ready to speak about it. But essentially, I kind of realized that my ex actually affected my relationship. I thought it was the breakup, and I've kind of realized it was actually him. And so I lowered my workouts. I've worked out consistently like 3 times a week, if not more, since I was 19 years old. And last year, I went down to once a week. I stopped going to the gym completely, and I only did Pilates. And so last year was a prioritizing of Pilates, yoga, anything soft, gentle, walking, swimming. Like, I stayed out of the gym for maybe 8 months, and I've only just joined a gym again. My PT does both Pilates and gym. So it would be like, I remember there was a day I was like, can we do 50-50? And she was like, sure. The system doesn't say you can, but you can. So we did like half an hour in the Pilates room and half an hour in the gym. And I slowly eased myself back. And now I'm back to loving the weights, loving the gym. But it took me about 8 months to recover. But how I built it up to begin with was when I was 19 years old. I made one rule. I had to go to the gym 3 times a week, but I didn't have to stay. And that was literally like, so I had to walk through the turntable. And if I wanted to walk straight back out, I could. And there were days, and people thought it was like the weirdest rule to set. But I was like, there were days I turned up to the gym with one shoe, knowing I couldn't actually stay. There were times I walked in just to walk out. But the reason why it worked is because the gym was a 20-minute walk away from my home. So either way, I did a 20-minute, both ways as well. But also, even if it was 2 minutes away from my house, it was the habit of going. And that actually, the reason I wasn't not going to the gym is because I was scared or I couldn't be bothered. Like, that was the part I focused on rather than what I was actually doing in the gym. And then the habit built up. And then going to the gym was the easy part. And I actually learned what I found fun within the gym. But actually, at that point, it probably was very diet related. It was very calorie compensation and a lot around aesthetic results. And it became, I actually had to detach from the gym specifically in order to start realizing I really like sports. Like, I really like squash. I really like paddleboarding. And discovering these new elements I found was a really easy way if you've been in diet culture for a long time. If you're doing a sport that you've never done before, it's a really fresh start with that relationship with that type of movement.
I think that's a really good point, that we often think of exercise being in these such tight parameters, but actually, as you just said, and sometimes I do call like exercise movement, because I'm like, all movement counts, like whether it's learning a skill, whether it's, doing something with friends or a challenge, like all of these things matter and count. And actually, you're right. Just as we have different seasons with ourselves and we go through different phases, same with exercise. Like, I remember when I first started out, I've had my CrossFit phase, I've had my Pilates phase, I've had, now I'm kind of in my boxing phase. And all of these things are how we continue our relationship with exercise. I don't know anyone that's ever had this like enduring relationship with exercise where it's never wavered, never changed. Like, everyone's on a kind of, undulating journey, like I said, and things change and you learn different things. And I think that's really important. And I just think that one of the things that I would really encourage people to do is to lose those rules that we often, when we're talking about the context and the background of where you and I both come from, so many of those are grounded in, the really outdated, misinformed stuff that we probably grew up thinking, like cardio is great for weight loss and all these bullshit things. So anyway, that aside, I think ditching those helps you to relearn what exercise is for you.
But also, when you call it movement rather than exercise, I will never forget a comment I got from someone who is like, oh, I'm a waitress, I'm like on my feet the whole day, and then I get home and I feel so guilty that I haven't gone to the gym. And I was like, do you know how many steps you probably do during your day? And you're not counting it simply because you're not merely on a treadmill. Like, that is your exercise. If you are getting home and not wanting to do exercise, that's actually your body being very smart and being like, you have been active.
You're exhausted
the whole day. But even if you are doing that from a diet mentality, like, count your steps or whatever it is. I personally don't think it's great for anyone's mentality to have like MyFitnessPal or pedometers and all of that. But if you want to and you want it strapped to your wrist, go ahead, you do you. Like, who am I to judge? But I think that's where, like, okay, you're still meeting those markers. They're just not within the very narrow context of a workout that lasts 60 minutes long and your heart rate is over a certain amount. Like, we have to broaden what movement actually looks like. I think it's this fear-mongering that comes from like, well, doctors say, and actually, if you look into the research around a lot of that, you being a waitress actually meets the, what is it? It's actually only 20 minutes a day.
Yeah, so 150 minutes of exercise a week, and then that's broken down into some resistance training and then some cardiovascular training. So yeah, like climbing upstairs is essentially like, resistance training. If you're doing loads of that a day,
But also
like
if you're
ferrying
holding
stuff,
like plates.
holding things. Yeah, as a personal trainer, there is the like, this is what the research says and this is what the evidence says. But there's also, I've worked in this industry for over 10 years and I know what's a reality for some people and having to tick the boxes of exactly hitting these metrics. Like, sure, there are certain things that I'd love people to do. Like, I would love more women to weight train. We know that there is such brilliant evidence
I'm
for
in
its
my weight
benefits.
training era right now.
I mean,
I'm
it's just,
loving it.
it is brilliant. And I think more and more, like previously, we've only had extensive research in the cardiovascular world, particularly with women as well. We're learning so much more now about the benefits of weight training for women, particularly at different phases of their life. We're talking about things like the menopause. 80% of osteoporosis cases are in women.
Oh,
We know
wow.
that for our bones, for our strength, and that has nothing to do with how we look. That is more our physical structure being strong for life. That's something that I can definitely get behind, and I'm a big advocate on. But also, in the same breath, I've worked on a gym floor. I know how intimidating it is for women. And I know, and that's why I run these workshops that I do, that the majority of women that come to those are terrified of even stepping onto the gym floor and lifting a
Yeah.
weight because they don't know how to do it. They feel nervous. They feel scared. There's slightly a higher barrier to entry. There's so many things that could, in their head go wrong. So I get it. So yes, you can have your like love to haves, but then you have to have your, this is the reality.
Yeah.
And let's work with where we are at here.
And let's work with good enough.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
and I think when you talk about the weight stuff, especially, like it took me a while. I had to unlearn all the diet culture stuff before I even touched weights because, like, obviously you get taught weights equals bulky.
Yeah.
But if I go back even further to my university gym, there was one floor that was all cardio machines, and then there was one floor that was all weights, and it was not called the weights room; it was called the boys' room. And so I never saw it. I actually never walked into it. And
That's
then
mad.
in my final year, they moved half of the stuff up. And so we were like, oh, should we peek in there? But we still didn't feel a right to be there.
Yeah.
Like I remember I was doing a set between 3 machines and this guy huffing and puffing every time he had to change the weights. But the ironic thing is every time he has to change the weights, I also have to change the weights too. But I remember my friend being like, why don't you just let him have it? And I was like, no, I'm paying the same gym membership as him. Like I get, like he can huff and puff as much as he wants. I have as much of a right to be here. But my friend got so embarrassed by me saying that and saying it quite loudly that she walked out the room and she was like, I'm not going to be associated with you. But like, if you think about like the right someone feels or over the space in the gym, and like what we must have been 19 years old at the time, like that's where all of this toxic messaging, unless you're questioning it, is probably in there somewhere, that like weights are a man's thing to do and that men get the space in the gym in that area and the treadmills are for the women, like things like that. I don't know where I would have picked that up from, but I definitely had by 19 years old.
Yeah, but that's the thing. People don't know where they often learn this stuff from, but actually it's in there somewhere. You're so right. Like we've either heard it or it's been in the media or on social media at some point. I can't tell you, like I've probably had maybe like a handful of clients in my lifetime who have come to me and said they want to like, build muscle. Most people come to me and they say, look, I do want to do weights, but I don't want to get bulky. And I'm really nervous about like this and that. And then we have the whole science chat about how it's like virtually impossible and it's probably not going to happen in a million years. And then we move on and we do strength training. But I do think that in there we have these ingrained narratives of, certain things when it comes to exercise, and they can really shape and color our relationship with it through our lives unless we're willing to quiet the noise and make our own decisions that feel right for us rather than what, society says. I
also think as a plus size person, one way you can make gyms more accessible is actually, there are a number of personal trainers having had bad experiences. I have the most amazing PT in the world right now, but like it's taken a long time to find her, and I've had a number of really good ones as well, but the bad experiences I've had have all stemmed from the assumption that someone in a bigger body wants to lose weight. So for example, I joined a gym 2 days ago and I was hesitant and nervous, and I'm on a scale of confidence, I'm a 10 out of 10. And yet I still was like, oh, I swear to God, because I'm joining in January, I'm going to have that assumption, like more so than, and also because I'm plus size, that like, oh, are you here to lose weight? Do you have a weight loss goal? All of these questions, which I don't want to be asked, to the point where I came in and was like, I'm an old member, I'm just rejoining, like, and I was making it very clear that like that wasn't where I was going down. And then they were like, but we need you to have a PT session. I was like, nope. Because like
really
that's where they put you on a scale kind of thing. But also even comments like, I remember I was with my PT and then she was running late, so she was like, just train with one of my colleagues for like 10 minutes while doing the warm-up. the colleague's warm-up was doing a plank. I've had 15 surgeries, all of them abdominal surgeries. I was like, I can't do that. And they were like, not that attitude. Can't isn't a word we use in the gym. And I was like, no, when I say I can't, I don't mean I'm lazy or I can't be bothered. I mean I can't because I've had my stomach cut into. And all that happens when I do a plank is it goes to my traps. And like, that's me knowing my body and knowing very well how to advocate for my body because I know it's just going to injure me. But actually, not many people have that level of self-advocacy.
Also just like the worst warm-up I've ever heard. But anyway, we'll judge that later.
Side note. But
Rogue.
how do you get to that point? How do you become more vocal and actually know what's right for you and what feels good in your body?
It's such a big thing that being able to advocate for yourself in an exercise setting is huge. And I think going back to your point about, you know, gyms, when I first started working in them, it was the process that every single person that came to train with us, we would put them on the scales. And I did that, you know, it was just how we were taught. When I did my personal training qualification, it was entirely geared towards fat loss. It was basically like, this is how to learn to help someone lose weight. That's it.
But also around measurement.
Yeah,
that there isn't
everything.
anyone who could ever want to go to a PT who doesn't want to measure
I know.
or progress.
Yeah.
Like, I just actually want to enjoy myself.
And do you know what's so crazy? There was never, ever a conversation about like, here's how to handle someone if they have a complicated relationship with exercise or complicated relationship with food.
Or chronic illnesses and injuries.
All of the above. Like, obviously, there are certain things where you need a higher qualification. But I think in the basic personal training qualification, there should be something that where we have a conversation around people that come to exercise who have difficult backgrounds when it comes to these things, whether it be that they're in a bigger body and they've felt really marginalized in the fitness space, or they're coming from the other perspective where they're actually wanting nothing to do with fat loss. I mean, anyone that wants nothing to do with fat loss, it should be a client's right to be able to say, I don't want to be weighed. I don't want to talk about diets. I just want to come and do a session with you where you're doing this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And so to your point, like, how do you have those conversations? I think it's a big confidence thing to say something like that. I do think that gyms are getting better. We're not there yet. There are still, you know, up and down the country, there are still gyms that operate on that same hamster wheel of like people coming in and being weighed as soon as they come in. But I think that being able to say, look, that's not something that I'm interested in and not something that I'm comfortable with. And almost to a certain extent saying, that's really triggering for me. I don't want to have any conversations around dieting. It's not where I'm at. I would like to have some advice when it comes to the training that I'm doing. These are my goals. Can you help me get towards them? And just quickly, in my book, there was a passage that I wrote about a personal trainer that I worked with at a very popular London gym who tried to publicly call me out because when I did change my approach to training and said, I'm not focusing on fat loss with my clients, you know, if it is a goal of theirs, I'm happy to work with them on it, but it's not my primary focus and I'm not going to have those conversations with them. And he lost his shit and was like, how can you do that? Like this, like it was awful. He sent me the most horrific messages. And it just made me realize like there are some PTs who are just so hell-bent on shaming people into, and because also like a before and after photo does great for your business. So like, let me get loads of these without actually considering like, am I genuinely taking someone on a healthy journey? Am I listening to what my client genuinely wants? Am I actually listening to that? And the other thing I'd say is never be afraid. I say the same with therapy, but never be afraid to walk away from a trainer. Like if a trainer isn't right for you.
If you have a bad experience with a personal trainer, it's not personal trainers.
No.
It's that one person.
Exactly. Like never feel afraid to walk away, to try someone different, to look online, to look for like different groups where they can recommend, you know, more kind of body positive trainers or people that are much less like diet culture-y or kind of removed from that space. There are some really brilliant people out there. And I know that now my feed is, you know, loads of brilliant trainers that do things so wonderfully when it comes to that. But the fitness industry is taking its time to move forwards, but we are getting there. And I also think that one of the things that I feel really helps is going in and just knowing what you want to get. So it's really helpful with a trainer when someone says like, I want to do this. If you don't know, that's okay. But I think that having a clear A to B is great for your, like, you know, client relationship. So even if it's something like, I want to get stronger and we could work out together, like what I would do, and I always found really fun, was like finding an exercise that they really enjoyed and then being like, right, you really like that. Like I remember with one of my clients, she loved trap bar deadlifts, like random, but she loved them. She was like, oh, this makes me feel amazing. And I was like, right, our goal is to get you really strong on this exercise. And every time we do it, we're going to make a note. You're going to get stronger on it. And it gives you that kind of tangible progression with someone that has nothing to do with how they look.
Also, when people ask for specific things, it's because my PT texted me 2 days ago. It was like, what do you want to do in our session? I was like, I don't know. I just need to slam something. Like, that was literally my reply. It
That's a
doesn't
goal.
have to be like deadlifts, but obviously it ended up being slam balls. But like, I was
Love
like, I
it.
just need to slam something. That was my response. And if you have a qualified PT, they'll be able to use that. Like, it doesn't have to be you knowing all the exercises or knowing how to use all the machines. But I also think you keep looking until you find the right person, and the right person will feel right. And it's all about feeling comfortable and open enough to say what your concerns are, what you're worrying about. And if you don't feel like you can be that vulnerable with that person, it's likely not the right person.
Yeah. The final thing I would say as well is I think empathy is really underrated in training. And I know that I developed that over my time of training because I had such a varied client list. I had all different people going through all different things. I had one specific client who was like a real like A-list celebrity person. And I know that like through her, I learned so much about being able to truly listen to someone. Like she was a big client for me and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so I always wanted to do my best. And actually my best was listening to what she wanted, really being able to empathize and listen and not just go in and steamroll past her and say, we're going to do this today. But to really, you know, she was going through some stuff. She was doing a really difficult job. Being able to be like, I'm truly listening to where you're at today. And as a result, this is what we're going to do. And I think that's a really crucial skill. So if you can find a trainer that is able to be flexible, not just stick to their bias and do exactly what they want to do, listen to you, listen to your goal, listen to how you're feeling, listen to what's going on for you as well. Like personal training is having a relationship with someone where you do chat about all sorts of things. I used to call myself a part-time therapist. Like you hear all sorts.
My PT hears about all my dating adventures.
Exactly. So someone that listens, that truly observes and who truly cares, that's a great trainer.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We end every episode with something you are working on, and it can be anything personal development related.
Oh, okay. I'm on the spot now. Oh, I'm actually really easily a good one. I'm working on reducing my screen time. I had a really bad mental health dip towards the end of last year. And when I have bad mental health dips, I will typically go into the most disastrous of scroll holes and make myself feel 1,000 times worse, as I'm sure a lot of us do.
It's my way of numbing as well.
Yeah, it does. It
like
numbs.
when I want to zone out the world.
Yeah, like it's either binge eating or scrolling for me. And scrolling was a big one towards the end of last year, which is not great. I got into reading. Over Christmas, I got some brilliant books. I asked for books for Christmas. And my sleep, as a result, like reading before bed, reading really good books.
Are you putting
fiction,
it in a different room?
My phone.
Yeah.
I don't put it in a different room, but I don't put it next to my bed. It's on the counter away from my bed. But that has changed my whole demeanor, like my whole vibe before bed, like calming down, getting completely lost in a story. And I'll give you a good book recommendation while I'm here. It's called The Bee Sting. I just finished it. It was excellent.
Oh, amazing. I'm always looking for a book recommendation.
I would definitely recommend that.
That's amazing. So the thing I'm working on at the moment is to not take things both seriously or personally. And so I think I'm learning it in my dating the most, where I had an experience last night of a guy unmatching me 45 minutes before the date. And then about an hour later, this first date I went on 2 days ago, sent me a text, was like, hey, I don't think I can date someone with the celebrity. He basically Googled me after the date and was like, I don't think I could date a celebrity. I'm not a celebrity, but he thought I was. And it was like, and the dating coach aspect of it, like, is a little bit intimidating.
Okay.
I had huge respect for him telling me, but also this is where like I seem to just find it easier to not take things personally. I'm like, thanks for letting me know. I'm glad you made that decision for you. And I think it's coming out of a relationship where my ex was not okay being public, that I was like, I made the joke when I first booked this morning of like, I'm so glad I'm in a relationship and I don't have to date with a public figure. And when I went back into being single, that was my greatest fear. And then it just happened. And I went like, it was this sense of liberation of like, well, we knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be to everyone's taste. And my job isn't changing. And you don't have to be public yourself, but you have to be comfortable with my public aspect of my job.
That's who you are. Yeah.
We're just having fun, not taking things seriously and not taking things personally.
I'm going to take that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Because also being a change maker means you also get the most shit because you're the one leading the charge. And so I'm sorry that some personal trainers aren't supporting you along the way.
Okay.
But people like you are so important, because I do think, honestly, it just breaks my heart there are people in the world who haven't experience the joy of the gym because they're still stuck in the like self-punishing mode. And I feel like people like you are really changing that. So massive respect for you.
Thank you
And I
so
really
much.
appreciate you taking the time. Where can people find you?
Oh, I'm on Instagram mainly at Alice Living, and it's got a weird E in it, so it's LIVING. And yeah, my book is called Give Me Strength if you want to have a read.
And your podcast as well.
Oh yes, my podcast is also called Give Me Strength, and that's on all podcast platforms.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a treat.
Oh, yay. Well, thank you so much for listening. And we've got a new episode next Tuesday, so make sure you hit follow and subscribe.